Good morning, everyone. It's Tuesday. Welcome back to the Explicit Measures Podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing this week?
Happy Tuesday, man.
Happy Tuesday.
I was about to say that, and I'm like, wait a minute. Is it Thursday? Is it Tuesday? No.
Yeah.
No. And
Already
in
one of
fact,
those weeks.
It is circled around to Tuesday again. Tommy's
it's
favorite day of the
officially-
week because it's the first day of the podcast after a 4-day weekend.
I know. We're going to a 4-day podcast, 4-day a week soon enough. It's coming.
You're
It's
right.
coming.
You're right. Because right now I can't tell that it's Tuesday, so we should
I
add
know.
more.
Yeah. We'll do a weekend live or something like podcast after dark.
Oh, boy.
There you go.
Talk about all the seedy things about Power BI.
Well, happy November. We got Microsoft Ignite coming up.
Yeah, big event this week. There's a lot of announcements coming through. I think it's going to be I think there's going to be some really good announcements. I think there's some, Microsoft's really pushing hard on new features, new things. So this is always an exciting event. I'm actually able to have the opportunity to speak at the event. I've never done speaking in alt space VR. I don't know if everyone's following the whole news thing, but every mega tech company is coming out with this virtual space thing. Seems like everyone's got some version of this. So Facebook just announced that they're doing a rebranding of themselves. They're doing like they're now Meta, I guess. That's their new company name, and so they're coming with a virtual space. Microsoft, I believe, acquired Alt Space VR a while ago, and it was an acquired company, and now they're trying to do part of Ignite in VR. So I'll be one of the subject matter experts for Power BI. I think it's on Wednesday around noon. So one of my sessions will be there. I think it's a free event for anyone to sign up. So you just have to sign up and anyone can go. But if you have time or if you want to listen to some of the upcoming events or things that Microsoft will be doing, I kind of recommend it.
So if it's just a round table and it's this virtual reality, I have to ask, can I look around and see who's talking?
Oh yeah. It's like, imagine, I'm gonna relate things to I guess people of our age and area, right? When I played Halo, I was running around and there was characters on the screen. It was a first person shooter, and there's no guns in this thing. However, it's very similar where there's
Microsoft does own Xbox. So.
Microsoft does own Xbox, so but it is like a virtual space. You have this room that you can hang out in, and there's an area where you can go get selfies, or you can take photos of stuff. There's different rooms you can kind of hop to between your topics that you're interested in or not. It was actually, so in the training for it, it was actually quite engaging. Guys, they were like, here's the training thing. And then I was like, this is interesting. So then I went into a bunch of rando alt space areas, learned about crypto for an hour, and then learned about went to another one where creators creating your own virtual spaces, how do you actually create spaces and stuff like that. There's a lot of interesting people out there building really cool stuff. So it was a lot of fun. I'm now kind of anxious to get back in and play around with it a little bit more. It's a neat experience. I was on 2D. I didn't have these are meant for virtual reality. So if you have an Oculus or some kind of virtual headset, you can use them. You can download the app for that. But in my case, I'm just on the PC, so I just have a screen up on my computer, and then I can just walk around and do things in there. So it's been fun. It's been interesting.
So next time, links below to equipment that's thousands of dollars, Mike, because I can equate that to speaking, right?
Yes, exactly.
Roll it into a business expense.
It's a business expense now.
Yeah. So if I stand in front of you tomorrow, will you know? If I just walk, can I move and then just go in front of my car?
Yeah.
Okay.
It feels. Aside from going to an actual event, it probably feels like of the events that I've attended, right? You go to these virtual events and they have screens and you kind of click into rooms and stuff like that. This is way more virtual than that. The one I went to for some gentleman was talking about cryptocurrency, which was a lot of fun. There was literally a central room where he had a presentation going and he was just talking to it and speaking to here's the coins that I'm working on. Here's how to get this thing. Here's how to buy crypto here. Here's how to get a wallet started. He was kind of going through things, and then they had not tunnels, but hallways. You'd walk down a hallway, and they'd have things about stuff you could read on the hallway, and then you go into another room, and there could be another person presenting in a different room. It felt like a conference kind of thing. It was very interesting. So I've never played Second Life. It feels like, I guess it would be maybe something similar to what that would be like. I guess I don't know. It was fun. I totally enjoyed it. It'll be an interesting exercise. Maybe I'll be
Check
spending more
this
time
out.
there.
I think we should do a Power BI tips, Power BI desktop world. Like if you follow us to the data connectors, watch out! Whoa, there's a perimeter. The dungeon. That would.
Walk down this really long series of steps into this dungeon thing, and we're going to
this
teach you
alley
about
kinda like
DAX.
this. Yeah. Yeah.
Here's
make challenges, game challenges, in order to publish the PBIX.
Yeah.
You know,
There's
actually-
there's actually other rooms where you can go into. They actually have like games and things, so you can actually interact with objects in these spaces. I guess so you can pick up like cups, and you can act like you're holding a drink. And if you have the VR headset, they give you little hand things, right? Things you put in your hands, and you can as you move your hands around, the character kind of matches your hands. I'm on a PC, so my hands just stayed straight by my sides, so you can tell right away who's on a PC and who's in a VR headset based on if their hands move. But if you nod your head will nod. You can it's pretty interesting.
We could get good with this, right? So you could do like the Squid Games, like jump in the bridge thing, and if you fall through, you lose all your day work.
all your PBIXs are deleted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you successfully published. Now that'd be
there. You go.
cool.
I got to be honest. I have not watched Squid Games.
The only reason I did is I fell ill one day over the weekend, and I just binge watched the
whole thing.
Yeah, like it never happens, right? I'm just so down and out. We're like, when do you get to watch a lot of videos? When I'm ill, so ill I can't get off the couch.
When I'm horribly ill. Oh my word.
So that's the only reason I caught up on it.
That's funny. Excellent. So let's jump into today's.
Speaking of challenges,
it's a good lead-in.
What a segue! We planned that.
We're jumping into more talk around governance. This has been a interesting topic for us. I think in many organizations, Power BI just maybe got turned on or it's around, but this whole topic of how do we roll this out? What does this look like? I think this new Power BI medium is a new space. I mean, it's an area where we typically had Excel before. It was kind of an ungoverned kind of just do data things on your own. Now we're bringing this an area of Power BI that's could potentially be more governed. So we're going to talk through just challenges with people and process and just Power BI deployments in general. So Tommy, frame us out here. What's the topic for today with these challenges? Let's frame the conversation.
Yeah, so this is part 3 of our series on governance, and this is all based on one article on the Power BI adoption roadmap. We've talked about kind of like what is governance, really like understand the terminology of how it's relating to data culture. What are objectives that you'd want for your governance program? Part 2, we talked about the strategy and basically all of the things that would go into how do you staff a data governance program, what we thought from where do you start. Today, we're kind of talking about in a sense, welcome back to Earth, or welcome to life, so to speak, where you can have your great vision, you can have a great strategy in place or in mind, but there are going to be challenges that you face. And it's unfortunately because you have to deal with people. With a lot of the things that we do, we can have not necessarily limited contact with people, but this is one of those efforts or projects that we are going to be relying on people in our organization. This is not something that can exist by the BI team or BI author alone.
Mm-hmm.
With that in mind, it's part culture. If you have a good culture where people buy in, do you have people who actually want to be a part of it and will be accepting of things to change? And honestly, can you prove the value of putting resources and staffing around a data governance program? So in the article, there's a section called Governance Challenges. And what Melissa does is basically outlines what you'd want to do in terms of, starting off. And she says, identify your organization's challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And she kind of breaks it down to strategy, people, process, data quality, and skills and data literacy. And I really love this because as I was looking through this, there are some that stood out to me more than others where I was like, if you don't have this in check, or if this is one of your challenges now, that better be the first thing you're working on.
Mm-hmm.
And the other part I thought too is, man, like how do you go over the hump with some of these challenges? Some of the challenges you talked about is basically with people is, lack of clear accountability roles and responsibilities. We talked about this before with staffing, but how do you get people to have a decision making criteria where you say, hey, this person or this board gets to make these decisions and this person doesn't?
Mhm.
And then also to getting people to actually say, yeah, there is a value in this and we will adopt it. And to me, that's kind of what I highlighted. But what I wanted to ask you is, or kind of focus on first, is these challenge sections. Did anything stand out to you guys as you read it or as you went through it? Because this is obviously still in the beginning phase of your building your governance program.
I feel like a lot of these challenges, I mean, let's just read some of these out. Maybe just go high level. What are the challenges we're talking about? There's strategy, people, process, and data quality. Strategies are things like lack of cohesive data, lack of executive support, insufficient adoption. People challenges might be lack of aligned priorities between departments, lack of identified champions, lack of awareness around best practices for self-service BI. I think that's one I see a lot of the time.
Mhm.
There's not an awareness, like people just don't know what they don't know. They just build what they think is right, and whatever Stack Overflow tells them, or a couple articles that they've read online. That's how we build reports. And there's for people who've been in this space a little bit longer, there's patterns you might want to follow. Also, with people challenges, would be resistance to following new guidelines, new governance, duplicate efforts, same data, same across different business units, lack of clear accountability. For process challenges, we're talking about clearly define a process, lack of standardization, insufficient ability to communicate your lessons learned. Oh, tell me about that that was a good one for me. A retro on when you build a report. How many people actually do that and try to take what they've learned and put it somewhere where people can use that?
Mhm.
The last one here, actually, there's even more here. There's data quality, sprawl of data reports, lack of trust in data, inconsistent reports. The value of data is too difficult or it's too hard to use the reports. Fragmented or siloed or duplicate data sets. And then your skills and data literacy challenges, varying skills to interpret graphs and visuals, and varying technical skills and skill gaps between your organization people. So let me just say this is kind of a broad summary of what's going on in all these different challenges areas. I would say this. I think you're going to run into some of these challenges, if not all these challenges, as you start working on governance areas. I think larger organizations who already have a governance board or a strong governance team to lead this have already addressed these. This is not specific to Power BI. This is just a general data
Mhm.
challenge, I think, in general. If your team's large enough, you've probably already seen a lot of this stuff and have practices around it so you could kind of use it. So that's, I'm giving my opinion here is for me, there's a couple things here that really stick out to me. I think some of these are, from my experiences, people challenges has been, you know, showing people there's a better way has been a hard thing to communicate, and just takes a little bit of time for people to kind of like, oh my gosh, we could do this. This is much easier. If I learn I hear a lot of times, I'm too busy. I'm too busy to learn the next thing. And I'm like, oh, that grates me because we're just shooting ourselves in the foot by not trying to improve when we do that. Sorry, I've said a lot of words, but I'll pause.
Good points. I think it ripped through the entire article in 15 minutes in.
We're
All
done.
right.
All right, let's
No,
go.
glad.
Back to work.
I think I think what's going to happen is we'll go through these things a little bit slower, but good synopsis of all the different areas that we're gonna chug through. Um, and you know me, mostly I like to slow down, so I'm gonna get stuck on the first thing,
Yeah.
which is strategy challenges, right? And I think this is kind of glossed over, but could be one of the biggest ones to even get started. Related to does the Power BI adoption roadmap and this governance strategy and what we're trying to do align with the business strategy? And that's a huge one because
Mhm.
if I think about the life cycle or the stages of a business, right? Like you've launch, like very very rudimentary, very startup, um rapid growth,
Mhm.
a transition period where that rapid growth starts to shake out or morph into what needs to be a more mature company, right? Where you're standardizing a lot more than you would in the rapid growth, creating a lot more process for continued sustainability and growth for the company. But there's the focus changes from, like, I think, very rapid sales to reach a point at where you may be sacrificing internal company
Mhm.
strategy, and then you start to, either decline or, have people that are going to continually innovate and start that cycle over again to some degree. And I think where, like, for me, the biggest challenge is going to be if you're in that very beginning framework, like, it's very likely you're not going to get the support for a lot of this type of activity, which is much more aligned with a mature company, I think, or
Mhm.
maybe a shakeout where you're trying to standardize on a lot of internal focused things, because not everything is so external focused. How do we make money? Everything that you're doing, is that towards the bottom line, or does it fall into, some particular area, to make sure that everybody's aligned for that meteoric, drive to increase the size of the company. And I think where that curve starts to happen is where you'll have a lot more success in trying to implement something like this that is absolutely required for a company to sustain itself, because otherwise, you're going to kind of, and it kind of aligns with the second point in here, which is the maturity, right? Your maturity in
Mhm.
that Power BI curve or BI or whatever, also ironically, not probably way not ironically, aligns with kind of this is are there only a few people that know things, right?
Hmm.
Single source of truth, like full breakdown, or do you have process? Do you have documentation? Do you have, like, and I see a lot of corollaries between, kind of like a stages of a company and that maturity level, and both those are literally deal breakers, I think,
Mhm.
in trying to roll out, because to the third bullet that's in there, you're not going to get executive leadership or,
Right.
sponsorship or support for something that's a very heavy process, internal, sustaining task that is going to require resources, time, etc. um i- as opposed to, maybe a mix, right, of, yes, we support these efforts, yes, we want a data culture, but we're not gonna wholly invest in it yet. And that's where I think this first bullet is absolutely, you know a big one for those reasons.
I think you're spot on because I've been thinking about this over and over and reading this, and it's going in parallel with some efforts that I'm trying to do myself. But just because all of this, even though we know the what the quality and the business value would be, to go to an organization, say, look, we're going to need a data council board. We're going to need a data champions team. We're going to need an operations unit. We're going to need someone from each member of each department, and they have to meet and they have to figure this stuff out together over time. That's a lot of resources. Oh, and there's going to be a lot of documentation. To try to sell that to what that is going to do, I think it's very hard to kind of write down unless you know your pain points. The other part too is, as I was going through these challenges, I kind of realized like you could be someone at a company who is hell bent on getting a governance program started. And let's say you even have someone on the executive level that at least has your support. You can do this on your own. There's no way you could write all the documentation. You could put together a roadmap. You could put together the vision. You could say, hey, here's week 2. This is what we're going to do. Second meeting, this is what we plan to do. But unless over time you have communicate with, again, who's going to be on this board, or figuring out first who's going to be part of this, um, you're not going to get anywhere. Like you have to identify people on different departments who, one, understand the value of it. So you have to sell them on that. And then two, are going to work together with other people from the organization on what, one, not just figuring things out, but what the priorities are and why that's valuable.
Man, I got so many.
And that's difficult.
These are good points. I think what you guys are saying though, I feel like we're taking this approach of larger corporation, a
Mhm.
company that has a lot of people that are. I mean, there's maybe a lot of different departments that we're talking to. I think this becomes more challenging when you have a thinner group of individuals that are not. You're looking at intra-department, right? One department only, where there's not as many resources, and I think there's still the same number of hats. I think you just have less people wearing or more less people wearing more hats at once, kind of in those smaller organizations. Because I mean, we talk with people from our user group, they're like the BI lead for their entire company. That's it.
Yeah.
The buck stops at them, and everyone else is more of like operations kind of things, right? There's only a couple, like there's a handful, one, two, three people around the BI side of things. So I think I don't know. I always err on the side of like it's nice to have all those things, and I think we should strive to those things. But if you're like a large organization that has many departments and lots of additional management across those things, I think you can incorporate a lot of people and ask for a large budget for those things. But I also think we have to be mindful of these smaller organizations that just don't have the people, and it's more around, you know, leading by example. And to both Seth and Tommy's point here, right? How do we get the executive support? How do we define data as our strategic asset? I think it really starts with some of these very small proof of concept type ideas,
Mhm.
jumping in, building something that seems to be adding some value, refining the idea, and then using that as a launch point for other things that you do around Power BI.
So it's a good point, right? What Power BI adoption and framework and strategy of implementing, better BI in your company
Hmm.
using Power BI is
Hmm.
going to look differently in different size orgs. I do think though that the same type of challenge is faced, right? Whether you're the single BI guy, if your small company isn't in a rapid growth cycle and they want to start building sustainable things across, multiple people, individuals, units, et cetera, like they'll find time in your schedule to devote to that task.
Agreed.
If that is not something that they're interested in, then they won't support that. I mean, you certainly, I guess, have the option of like, hey, boss, I'll do it on my free time and my 60 to 80-hour work week. But ultimately, I think those same types of things live there. The other point, though, that I think I struggle with a little bit is I'm all for incremental rollout, but at like to the point here in this first strategy challenge is while it talks about the maturity level being an area of conflict, it's also insufficient adoption planning. And I think a lot of our conversations have been around the point of which, and it revolves around this governance article, which is why we spent, I think, 3 podcasts on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it is really, regardless of the size of the organization, whoever is driving the adoption, whether it's a single person or a team, right? Like having what we talked about in a previous episode, though, that bubble chart, that strategy of like how it's going to work, like what is the framework, and then you can pick and choose how you want to slice and dice and implement it. But the overall strategy should be in place, at least on a theoretical level, while
Mhm.
you roll it out in the organization. Or maybe it's um rolling it out to slices of the organization for a big one, and in a small one it's okay, we're going to adopt this practice, but as we grow there's a framework for other people to follow, and that's the value there, right? So your challenges might be different, but like that overall framework absolutely has to be part of that.
Every time I look at these bullet points or we go through something like this, I'm thinking to myself, I want to answer the question. These to me, these are all like these are the things to look for. Like these are potential challenges you're coming to, and I always feel like I walk through these bullet lists and be like, what are things I can do right now that potentially will help resolve these? And so like you talk about strategic things, like there's a lack of coherence governance, there's lack of executive support, there's insufficient adoption planning, and I keep thinking in my mind, okay, so these are the potential challenges I'm going to walk into. What is the thing that I do to resolve some of that? I think my answer for strategic challenges would be is do a proof of concept, make sure you're, you know, talking to the right people at the executive level, at least communicating to them what your plan or strategy or how you think this could benefit the organization, because someone's got to make a decision at some point to say we're going to support this. And then how do you have a governance data strategy? Shoot, go to Melissa Coates training, Data Coates training. I think that's a really good way of at least getting a picture of what organizations should be doing for data governance. Go get some solid training on this. Look up, go research some stuff, get some, help at that level. I think, those are the kind of the three areas I would say, how do we solve some of these initial strategic challenges? What do you guys think?
Yeah, as you were talking, I keep thinking if someone in our position or our role at a company, we could work 100 hours extra towards governance, but we would only get so far because again, we need other people's approval and decisions. Like if you were to set, I want to focus on what Seth was talking about, where the incremental rollout, where you do a subset of the organization, that risk compared to like organization wide, like that's where you start. I would actually err on the side of doing that proof of concept or doing like a call it a beta test or like a preview test with a department that you already have support, or like a department that already has a good culture that would understand it already, to show here's what the structure of the people look like. So we have the decision making criteria. Let's identify for department X, what their biggest pain points are and what we're trying to achieve. And then let's show the success from it. Because again, in my head, if you were to start the people and the pain points from the organization side, I think it's going to get very complicated quickly without, especially if it's your first time, is the first time people in the organization are dealing with it, because you're going to have all these different, we'll say, mindsets from all the different departments on the terminology, what they perceive as important, like what's important to them, that I think would be really difficult to get that right off the bat, compared to actually showing the value. Like, hey, we did this for sales. They are now doing self-service. We've optimized these reports, and now we have this dictionary that they know. This is what we want to do. And then and you also have your own, customer story, so to speak. But that's where I would kind of err on in terms of the proof of concept, just because we are dealing with people, we are dealing with other people's pain points, where we can't just build a report and solve it for them with this. Other people, like we are relying on people that are not in BI to provide their input, and they have to put their effort in for anything to go forward.
I think I like the approach, Mike, because I think all of us are to some degree hammers, right? Like here's a bullet point, it's a nail. Like how do we solve it? I think
totally
a lot
at
of
that spot.
I think a lot of the strategy challenges to me don't have the very easy answer of like, oh,
No.
go invest time here. I think to me a lot of these are the discovery phase. Like where are you at and what type of organization are you in? Because depending on where the focus of the organization is, you could just be like, okay, it's a hard fail. Like it is not worth spending a bunch of time in trying to implement this right now. Or maybe it's a conversation about a future initiative or something, down the road, as opposed to trying to implement something that your business is not aligned with, right? You're not aligned with where the business needs are when trying to roll something like this out. And I think when we talk about POCs or MVPs, one thing that I don't think we see enough is like there's failures in those. Like sometimes like it's not a good fit. We just don't, like, now is not the time because maybe our maturity level is a 1, and we don't want to deal with the struggles of trying to implement a wider solution on top of like nobody knowing anything about like core things about our data. And we want to make sure that we build the maturity level first so that our rollout is going to be easier. I think to me this is a guiding, like it's a big shift of like, do we engage in this on a very heavy level, or do we just take pieces that are incrementally going to benefit the business and still get value, but not try to do like a much broader scope of everything?
This is also interesting to me because it's, to me, I heard you saying something like, pick a proof of concept where you will win, right? There's
that's not what I said.
let me rephrase some stuff then, because you said there are parts of your business where you're not mature enough to handle, or there's not enough maturity to get into a specific area, right? So there's going to be, if you take this topic, or if you work with this team, they're set in their ways. They're going to do the way they've done them, and their leadership is not really willing for change. They just want it done a certain way.
That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. To me, that's a people challenge.
Okay.
I'm talking about strategic, high level, like, will my business support this? I'm asking questions about like this in the organization, and people are like, hard no, man, not right now. How about we make that a next year initiative? Or you're doing discovery on, like, listening to the podcast, you're doing discovery on all of the documentation that's been put together, and you're realizing that like you're sub maturity level 100, right? Like, you have a lot of things that you can invest your time in that are going to be much more valuable to the business or to your time or your group or your area, that are going to benefit BI, Power BI, the rollout of data, et cetera, that are incremental steps as for the roadmap or the adoption, rather than saying, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to build a framework about Power BI adoption roadmap within, our company. I'm going to build out all these strategies, and your company is going to be like, yeah, that's a good slideshow. No. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I do, but I feel like
I think the thought dovetails a lot more in line with some of the things I've heard from you, which is, I'm in a department. I'm just going to start doing things that are beneficial to the company. And I would say this is where you would move into more of that focus, where your time is best spent in creating value for the business or your area, et cetera. It may not be the whole shebang.
Yep, I agree.
But if you have the whole shebang in mind, right, then you know where these pieces fit into the mold, as opposed to trying to get it implemented on the organizational level. So either way, maybe what I'm saying is there's two different ways of approaching it. One is there's a ton of value understanding that there's this strategy you can adopt in terms of like, what does the big thing look like? Because every piece you build would be specific to supporting one of those, versus, you're in a position where you do want to roll this out, right? And whatever strategies you're coming up with are going to get rolled out to the organization.
I'm of the opinion in portion of the strategy piece. I think the strategy can work at what you described as company-wide, whole organizational level, and it can work at a smaller level as well in intra-department. And I'm one of those people where if I'm going to face a bunch of resistance in a particular area or a particular department, that's probably not where we need to be rolling out Power BI 100%.
Maybe it's the last place.
Maybe,
right?
yeah, exactly. So I was actually thinking about like, it's how do you eat this elephant, right? It's kind of one bite at a time kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking like, well, maybe we go after the easier parts of this, not easier, but the ones that are like, there are parts of this that'll be very hard, and there'll be parts of the strategy that are going to be not as hard. There's going to be certain departments that are easier to jump in and work with. There's going to be other departments that are like finance. They love their Excel document. You're going to have a hard time pulling out Excel and giving them only Power BI. So I know that it's an area where if you're going to just say, we're only going to do Power BI, your strategy has to change kind of what's going on there. So all I'm trying to say is, I think, you have to kind of assess where you're at in the company and kind of figure out what angle can you take at it and start adding value in those individual areas. And hopefully, and again, this is part of maybe the broader plan here, is as you add value, people naturally start getting curious about things that are happening, or you're talking about it happens. It goes back to our, I'm going to people now challenges, but people are lazy, and they want the path of least resistance.
But it's a good transition, because even some of the things you address, like what about the area that doesn't want to adopt, right? Now, like dovetailing into, let's say, you're developing the strategy and a roadmap, and you have some of these people challenges. Like, Mike, one of your ideas that you just said was, make them last at the table. Maybe you push them to the end.
Yeah, right? they don't get access to the data.
Right. What are other things that potentially you could do with challenging individuals that are, potentially blocking a rollout of the roadmap?
Where I've seen challenge individuals happen, right? Sometimes there's people who are just totally resistant to things. And usually what happens in those cases, you kind of can wait them out. I mean, there's also this era of like the sands of time kind of change things as well. People move into positions and people move out of positions, and things roll through and things don't. So, I mean, sometimes you may try an initiative with a team and the leadership's not there, or the people don't have the vision that you want, or we're going to stay on-prem. That's the way we're going to be. But then, I've seen this where things kind of happen. People move on, people change, positions change,
attrition,
attrition,
Okay.
acquisition.
Mhm.
I don't know what it is, but at some
Sure.
point in time, things kind of change, and there's usually a different mindset, and that may more align with the direction that you want to go. So part of this too could be part of it. Just it's a waiting game at some point.
Well, and I think it's really important to remember about this document and also kind of the roadmap in general is two things that Melissa says consistently. One, governance is not something that is ever going to be completely done.
Agree with that.
Right.
Mhm.
So that's the number one piece. I read this and you're
yeah.
like, oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
you're not going to solve this like roll it
Right.
out the adoption
Right.
program.
Yeah,
Like,
And-
we're
and
done. Strategy's over.
even though
people are a problem all the time.
even though she outlines out like, oh, data governance board and roles responsibilities, and level 2 talks to level 3. That's all great. And you're like, oh, like when I read that, like, how the heck am I going to get, like just introduce that?
Yeah.
But the other part that is consistently through the document is, and also to the people issue where maybe you don't have the buy-in or someone just, doesn't see the value, is when you're going to, say, where are we going to focus? She says like select an important pain point, high priority need, or known risk. It should have significant benefit and can be achieved with a feasible level of effort.
Mm-hmm.
Choose something users are likely to support because the change is low
That's
impact.
what I was just talking
Yeah.
about. It's like
Yeah.
we have to figure out where can we remove pain from people in a metered way so that people actually adopt it. Like oh, this is helpful. Like you don't want to go solve problems that people don't need answers to. Whoa,
Right.
zoom in, Tommy.
Yeah.
Zoom in.
You have an earthquake in Chicago there.
Yeah, right.
So
Oh goodness.
I do want to. So we've been talking a lot about just kind of strategy. I do want to. There's like 4 other topics here. I do want to try to hit a couple other ones. I'd like to talk. I mean, the comments here from Chris and Kevin are talking about isn't most of challenges coming from people. I would say a lot of your challenges are going to come from the people challenges. I mean, there's probably other things here too, right? Process and data quality, but I think a lot of what we talk about, or have we talked about, is a lot of these people challenges. What do you guys think about people challenges?
No, I mean, I think we addressed. You hit on the 2 points, right?
Yeah.
The 2 different kinds, I should say, of
Yep.
people challenges. One is, the aligned priorities between teams. Are there big teams, or the leaders of certain areas that,
Yep.
or coworkers, right? If you on a smaller level that are resistant to change,
Mhm.
that's a shocker, right?
Yep.
And are they like trying to block what the adoption of Power BI, versus I think where my concern in a lot of these conversations have been is just making sure that you have the strategy in place, because you have the information worker, right? Like the people that you're trying to help, but you have, if you screw that up, like it's kind of hard to unwind or get them back, right? Because what you're doing is you want to ultimately shift how they do some things that will pay dividends if they buy into it. But if you lose them, they're going to just go back to their own ways, and you're going to have harder pains, I think, in trying to be successful in overall adoption.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You definitely want to, I would say, in a sense, err more on the side of caution than not, in terms of, like, if you were to say we're going to roll out with every department, every team, we're going to have a first council meeting, and obviously you can imagine how that would go, especially with conflict, or people are like, why are we here?
Mhm.
People are not going to come back to that. So when you're going to roll out something, we'll say like corporate wide, or from universally, and every department's represented, you better have a pretty good set agenda, policy, and leadership there too, from how
I
you
agree.
drive the conversation.
Yep.
Because if there's the lack of what is this person here for, their responsibilities, the lack of that structure, why would someone say, oh yeah, this is going to work? So having that, at least from the people side, being able to, you can write all the documentation on vision, strategy, what we want to do, and you interviewed 1,500 people, and you have this all in a nice Word document or in your SharePoint center of excellence, or wherever you want to put it. But I think starting smaller, and for me, it'd be identifying people in the organization that are have some sway, and also have bought into Power BI, you know that they are familiar with it, getting their input and then starting small to be kind of, because I think every company is going to be different too on how that structure is going to look. To me, that's outside of necessarily data governance. I think just in general for just implementing a program at your company, having that clear set of, the hierarchy, who's there, why are we here, what are we going to, what is this, what is my role and what is my responsibility,
Mhm.
is huge from the onset. That's one of the things that I think needs to be established from the onset.
There's a difference between saying you're going to learn this versus here's a better way. Let me help you get to this stage. I think there's a tone there for me that really makes a difference for how I perceive a lot of the people challenges. And as I look at a lot of this people challenges pieces here, I really like the idea of like the center of excellence or the community of practice, right? I think I've seen this in multiple organizations where there's a hunger for like doing things better. Some people kind of either stumble into it or start learning on it, and they get to a point where, hey, this Power BI thing is free. I can go download it. Oh, this is interesting. I can get some stuff done here. Oh, Power Query. Wow, look at that. Oh, I'm doing the Power Query inside Excel. And so for me, like my personality, you have to identify people I think that are kind of like that learner, teacher, likes to help other people mentality, because those can be your advocates, your voices to why this is a better way. And again, I think a lot of this boils down to like people with another person to person, right? It's relationship based, and it's helping other people kind of learn or get these techniques around. And again, some of my notes I put down here is like, I think these things are very essential to a company, at least making the space for them. Having, I think, Tommy, what you guys do when you do like a Friday or a Rockwell Automation, they do like a Friday open office hour. Like, here's people who are doing this kind of stuff. Come and talk to them if you have questions. And I think when you start seeing people kind of when you have a culture where people are starting to adopt it and they're just starting to learn on their own anyways, engaging them with that thirst, with whatever they're trying to do, and just kind of coming alongside them and showing them a better way, I think goes a long way, because it's a lot of this one-on-one peer learning.
It dawns on me that in all these conversations, there's an assumption I made that we've never spelled out, I don't think. And Mike, you just addressed that, right? When I talk about back end strategy
Mm-hmm.
and making sure that you have all these pieces in place, it's because you or the group are like have one first job, and that is to sell this idea
Mm-hmm.
to your internal users.
Yep.
And the way you do that is specifically in your business. You know, the very real, like the business problems that they're
Mm-hmm.
solving in the different groups, etc. There has not been one time in my professional career in consulting, and I don't know what your average is now, but when Mike and I would go into a client and do the bake off with other
Yep.
competitive tools or like whatever, Power BI never lost. Like, there's the
Yep.
story in there where your users are using Excel. Guaranteed, they're
Yep.
using Excel.
Yep.
And many of them have a very laborious process, at least most of them,
Agreed.
that they're doing this thing, this thing, this thing, this thing, and it takes 2 hours, and then they get their report or they get their insights. Every single one of those you could use as a use case for automation of taking the information worker into the next level, where they now have a tool that they can automate things, get insights faster, and work on loads of data that are much larger than what their challenges are now.
Yep.
So like ultimately, the reason something like this succeeds is because you're solving a problem for them
Mhm.
and speeding up their work. And I'm telling you, like, that Excel into Power BI story for reporting, for automating their jobs, for figuring things out, like,
Yep.
if you like get in on that level, which you should be,
Yep.
right? It's not a chore for the information worker to learn this stuff.
Yeah.
You get them engaged because you're
Yes.
gonna solve problems for them, which
Exactly.
is why we're so excited about Power BI all the time,
Yep.
because there's time saving in here.
Oh, totally.
There's you learning new skills that allow you to like work with bigger data sets. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the fun and value of this whole thing is because there's real value to every level of the business when you do this. And it's your job to sell that story
Yep.
before you start putting out like process and governance and all these other things. And
Agreed.
that's any level of
Yeah.
organization.
So
And when the user level, like you're saying, Seth, sorry, Tommy. When the
Yeah,
user
yeah.
level is like, I'm just excited about this point because I think this is the point that I've been kind of trying to make here is like when that user base is excited about something, that's when you can really instrument change for the organization. Like when you have people doing this stuff on their own and being hungry to find a better way to solve these problems at that level, that's a captive audience. That's an opportunity
Yeah.
where you can really leverage and pick out, okay, let's use these people. Let's do a proof of concept. And so at some point in time, this stuff becomes loud, starts making enough racket, a noise, that people at the upper level say, "Whoa, what's going on here? I like these reports. I like the things that are being produced from this department. Let's work on that and roll it out larger. Let's figure where else." And I think as you move people along, to your point, we've never walked into a situation where Power BI has lost the sale. It's pretty much been Power BI versus everyone else, and the value that comes from this tool, is immense compared to everything else.
Well, and even to the chat, I'll make one more point, right? Like there's variations of this, right? Somebody points out that, Excel and, connecting the AS model, like think about how many different types of solutions you can support using Power BI,
Yep.
right? Excel and Power BI,
Paginated
reporting
reports,
services, paginated reports,
embedding
Power BI
to
reports up there,
websites.
work in Excel,
Yep.
connect to my data, like it's a data source instead of whatever, connect to any data source, like just the like, okay, pick something that doesn't work in that ecosystem.
Yep, exactly. Tommy, raise your hand, Tommy.
So
we've been talking over top of you the last 2 times.
You know who doesn't?
I got
care
one more
about
point real quick.
everything?
Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Absolutely not.
I'm just
You
teasing.
know who doesn't care besides about everything you guys just talked about and praised the glory of Power BI?
Ooh.
Tableau.
Most users
Oh,
who are just you. So
disagree.
hold on. So yes, they definitely see the value, but at the end of the day, you have a random marketing manager who's like, hey, you're going to access an app.power BI. It could be app.tableau or it could be app.google analytics, but they have a specific purpose, an objective in mind when they are going to fetch their data. They want something that they're familiar with. They want something that they know they can rely and trust on. So it could be Power BI, or it could literally be I had a paper and pencil that I just write really fast. Obviously, we know the value of the automation, like the ability to create something out of nothing with all these different challenges and create this one single solution. But for a user, if they're looking at 2 reports in Power BI that are so cool, but they are both, we'll say, ambiguous with their terminology because the business has not developed their terminology and what their hierarchies are and their corporate KPIs and this unified source of truth, it does not matter what the tool is. So there's a really? So
No, I don't disagree with you, and it depends on like what is the end user, right? You're not going to sell or convince everybody that your tool is better or whatever. If your organization is pushing Power BI as the single strategy because there's a million reasons why you would want to do that, as opposed to having 5 different UI tools or BI tools that support your need, whatever. Like the reasons are varied. If your company supports all 5, fine. Like build your processes around adoption, whatnot. You're not going to convince everybody. What my point is you have to come with why somebody would want to care about like what you're peddling or what problem you're solving for them in that pitch. Like there's got to be a reason why you would want to create these adoption strategies in your organization, because it's meant to make the whole organization a better organization,
and I don't
data quality and the awareness of it.
I don't disagree with you at all, but at the end of the day, a user is going to relate or basically associate the quality of Power BI with the quality in their experience in the report.
Not disagreeing there at all.
So unfortunately, obviously for the system, the internal, the people building, this is what we're building on. That's a conversation. That's a conversation with, I think, a different audience with governance. But the general idea, I think, from organization point of view, for your sales teams, your marketing, or the general user, the consumer of Power BI, I mean, as long as they know that they have something reliable that gives them the data better than anything else. If
I agree with you,
Microsoft stops support,
but I would
stop supporting.
argue all these tools do this. To your point, all these tools do the same thing. It's totally fine,
Yeah.
but I would say the speed to delivery of those tools is totally different. I used business objects with a team. It had all the tables as a model of data. That's what the users wanted, and all the users were doing were going in and making large tables and dumping them out, and then spending lots more time in Excel. And again, I think the common denominator to a lot of what we're talking about here is going to be Excel. And I think this is where I lean a lot on this thing, thinking to myself, like to Seth's point earlier, like there's a reason why this stuff is all like, why Power BI never lost a sale for us, because Tableau didn't have Power Query. Tableau has another part of the tool that you have to go use for ETL and engineering. The time to delivery between like when I'm looking at data to what I can give you in a report is, I think, shorter than any other tool that's out there. It's a very short design cycle to get through that process. And I think the level of effort that you're getting there because of the analysis services engine, Power BI is basically nothing without analysis services. That's the hook for me. I mean, you can run Tableau on top of a report, but you're now hitting a SQL server in the back end, which is just always, I've seen it always be slower. It's not as fast. So I think, to your point, Tommy, it doesn't matter. People just want their insights. They just want data. They want to make decisions on information. I think that's going to be a fair assessment across every single team. Where I think Power BI wins, though, is its tools and its familiarity to like that Excel user. It's so familiar to what Excel's already doing that the hurdle to get into that versus Tableau or Click or Looker or other things is much less, because you've got to spend more time looking at these other tools. You've got to learn something that's net new versus, hey, this is one step above Excel. Let's go there.
Right. And I think, so I'm a huge proponent of, especially in higher level conversations where we're not talking about specific tools, right?
Correct.
If your organization supports multiple BI tools and different ways in which you're looking at data, I'm not saying you have to convince everybody to change from Tableau or Looker or whatever to Power BI.
Yep.
Like the pitch is the same though.
Correct.
Like you're trying to solve people's problems, and that's what this tool does better than any of the others, I think, right? Especially for Microsoft or Excel users.
Yep.
Like the other point to this though is, if your organization is wanting to pick a tool, right, which many do, they want to centralize around a tool that best solves the problem.
It makes financial sense to do so.
It is right, because take this adoption strategy, like take the processes, take the governance, and now interject 2, 3, 4 tools.
Yeah, they get more friction across all the tools.
I understand that on a high level, the tool's not the discussion, but it does create a lot of complexity around user support.
Agreed.
And who's using what, or how they're using it, or how you roll them out. Like it just complicates the strategy. So sure, you can choose many different tools, right?
Right.
How it just complicates, I think, that overall talk.
I agree.
And the hardest thing for me though is when you're talking about Microsoft products, Excel is used everywhere, mostly, right? In that story,
I use Google Sheets.
If a user has a manual process to build something, Power Query alone sets Power BI apart from all the other tools. And yes, we're talking tools because it solves their problem better than any of the other tools. So like, I get it. High level, you can have many different things. You don't want to talk tool sets, but when we're talking about capabilities and what you can show to users or give them advanced paths to solve their problems faster, it's a better solution overall, because you don't need 3 different tools to do the thing that this one does.
And nothing you said I disagree with. The one point I'm trying to add on top of this, though, is at the end of the day, for a company where there's probably a lot of little tiny tools out there, there's your Google Analytics, your Google Ads.
Sure,
people will no, but here's the thing though, like people always go, unfortunately, to the thing that's going to give them, in a sense, the best experience.
Least resistance. I would rephrase.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's going to be the path of least resistance. I would agree with you.
And if my email marketing, service that I would say this is a terrible, user interface, but they know where to go. They can look at their campaigns easy. They get their numbers and they know they're right, because they look in a report and it's like, it's harder to see, what I'm trying to see. Obviously, right. Exactly. So then this goes back to the people thing too, where if we're going to provide the value or make the case to get people to say, yeah, we should centralize all our data in Power BI. Like, can we connect to that source in Power BI and actually store it? Then we can connect with other things. For people to buy in for that, I think there's a, in a sense, a prerequisite where there's trust in the BI team or in the governance, where I know the data is going to be accurate and reliable. And also it's going to provide me more value, where because we have our terminologies and our definitions, there's not, 18 different Excel files that say when our members are created, that I know I can always look at members a certain way, and I can connect it with all my other sources. I can connect, email campaigns with our e-commerce. Are you kidding? That's amazing.
But that's the point there. So when you go to these different individual tools, you go to Google Analytics. Google Analytics is a single tool about one single topic of data.
Right.
When things start falling apart. So I think you're fine to stick in these initial tools and stay there until you start having these broader questions. And I think at some point in time, the needs of the data grow to a point where you need to merge data between two different sources. And I think those are the places where you start saying, I don't want data in these other source systems, Google Analytics, MailChimp, or whatever the other sources of data. There is reporting that goes along with them, and it's probably good for what they're doing for their data. But there's always, I think, additional value that comes from centralizing more of that information into a centralized place. And I think when you start, the deeper value that we're going to continue to see around data is, I don't need data from one source. I need it from many sources. And I think that's where the challenge becomes harder. And to your point, Tommy, like, a good strategy around the data and the data quality makes a lot of sense, because now you can enable the business to pull from these different sources. And we have to be able to pull from a source and trust the data that's getting there. We have to be able to say the data in this table is as good as going to the Google Analytics portal page. And I think that's why we have like Center of Excellence's description of data, talking to people about how it's transformed and what it's doing. Give people more processes around looking at, here's the raw version of the data that we get. Here's a refined version. Here's an even more refined version when we blended the data, so they can see the progression of how that data is changing, and they can have confidence in that, know that data's integrity is good.
And because where the pain points happen is like, look, we connected your email and your web analytics, and you can look at sales by product type.
Bingo.
And they go, great. Is that product type in this report, or the product type that someone created, that other hierarchy in that report?
That's a data quality,
and that's part of it.
But that's a data culture quality thing.
What I'm saying is, it doesn't matter if you can connect. This goes back to what I'm saying, where if you're going to get people buy-in, it doesn't matter about the tool or your connectors or the solution from the back end, obviously to us, but to them, if they're like, well, I don't know if those product types is that our updated list, where those members, where's that sales region come from? That looks wrong. Like, without that conversation from the company level to say, let's actually define who owns, the business, our business,
you've moved squarely into the data quality portion of the challenge. That's another challenge. This is a whole other challenge part.
With people.
Where do you get the data from? Who owns it? Who's responsible for making its update, make sure that's right and updated?
Because you will have conflicts here. This is
ultimately, like, Tommy, you're 100%. I agree with you. If all of this solves zero problems and provides zero value to you,
you're not going to use it.
Then don't use it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, when I say sell people, I'm saying show the value for the use cases that it makes a ton of sense for. I think there's a distinction between that and people who are like, no, man, I don't want to learn something new.
Yeah.
Right. Because you're also going to run into that. And those are the people that all you're trying to do is outline for them, what is the value of your organization going through this? And the only reason you're going through this is because your organization sees that there's value in these efforts, in putting, these things forward for people to ultimately, if they want to stick on their sideline, that's fine. But if there's a centralized place, Tommy, that is defining all of these metrics, and you're doing that on the back end, you're right. The business doesn't care how you're doing that. Right.
We need another whole topic on this.
You're developing the strategy, to make sure that you're giving them the inroads to that data.
Yeah. So
I peeked
ahead. A little wrap up then.
I peeked ahead in the article. I think we're going to need another topic on this one. This was good outlining this. I mean, we got through probably about 3 of them or 4 of them. Strategy. We talked a lot about people. We talked a little bit about process challenges. Definitely talked some here at the end around data quality challenges. But in the next portion of the article, let's try that again. In the next portion of the article, there's governance planning. And that part I think is very interesting because now it starts talking about what I wanted was like, here are some key activities you can do to help with strategy. Here are some key activities you can do around working with people. And I think to me, this is like, if you just listed the challenges, I would be sorely disappointed. You have to go to the next portion of the article around governance planning, because that's where a lot of these like tactical things are. How do I know what I don't know? How do I know what will work and what will not work? This is the section that's going to give you more of like these inclinations around, try this. This might work for you.
So if I got just a quick wrap up for you two, what would you kind of recommend a little recipe for just getting a program running? Like the things, the based on what we talked about today, like those essentials.
I think that that's a great answer question
for
the
another,
next after the next
another
podcast.
topic. Oh, yeah,
No,
yeah.
but like to Mike's point, like that's where we
Yes,
get into
sure.
like the strategy and key outputs of a lot of the activities.
I'd highly recommend. I sent the link in the article earlier in the chat. I'll try and put it also in the description as well. Read the governance challenges and things that you will face. These are things that are real. And then don't be dismayed. Right behind that, there is a governance planning section that gives you some kind of key ideas. So I think this will be probably governance part 4 at some point, where we talk about the governance planning portion of taking the challenges we already talked about and starting to figure out, okay, what are some practical things I can do right now that'll help us get through some of these hurdles, or at least things we can try to see if they work for our organization. Well, with that, we're gonna wrap it. This is a great topic. I was getting like angsty and heated inside around this. This is a very relevant topic. I think we have all really good experiences here. So if you were also getting, if you were yelling at your phone or if you're yelling at your headphones on the podcast, our only ask is, if you don't mind, please share this with somebody else. Communicate with somebody else that you enjoyed the podcast, that you found a lot of value from it. It either challenged you or made you think about something or learn something. Please share that with someone else. Tommy, where can we find the podcast?
You can find the podcast anywhere they are available. If you are watching live right now and you want to listen again, do it on your run while you're working, subscribe on Apple or Spotify, anywhere you have a podcast app, we are there. And make sure to subscribe there, and also to leave a rating or review. If you are listening now to a recording, I want to join the conversation. Join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central. Just subscribe to Power BI Tips on YouTube and LinkedIn. We have future episodes scheduled, so you can basically say, alert me, notify me, and join the conversation.
And I'll wrap it with Matthew Roach says, give them feedback on the documentation. Are they in line or not? So thank you, Matthew, for joining the podcast. I appreciate your time on YouTube jumping in here. This has been the documentation is absolutely incredible. Highly recommend you read it. If you haven't seen these challenges, you will in the future. With that, thank you all very much. We'll see you on Thursday.